Welcome everyone to our Eat Well Cooking Club. Our Eat Well Cooking Club is more than our cooking demos and sharing recipe. It is a lifestyle program. And this month, our October series, we're focusing on cancer. They all matter. We know that October is the pinkest month of the year with breast cancer, but we believe at Advocates that they all matter. Today, I'm going to be your moderator. I'm Dale Kane. This particular forum in October is a collaborative partnership. Advocates for Community Wellness, we partner with Stonebridge Healthy Community Outreach, Health Promotion, Disease Prevention, community-based organization, and we're both nonprofits. Our common mission is to improve eating habits for healthier lifestyle, increase longevity and quality of life. We have three goals: increase consumption of vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, to encourage a more nutrient-rich diet for better health, and to reduce risk factors of chronic diseases and illnesses. And third, to attain a healthier way through consumption of plant-based nutrition. I want to share our disclaimer, waiver, and consent that this information that we're sharing is strictly informational only, is educational purpose only. It's not intended to replace the advice of your medical doctor. The instructors, we will share our training and our credentials with you. And then you understand that the nutrition and cooking instruction is intended for general information only. With the recipes that we share, you can modify these recipes to fit your own personal health needs. And recording. All our Zoom sessions are recorded. You will get a copy of the recording after it's been audited. When you come on, the video and audio are turned off, but you can turn them on. We encourage you to turn them on, and you can turn them on and off at your discretion. Our presenters and agenda today, Dale Kane, I'm going to talk a little bit about lifestyle nutrition, foods that fight for you. Chef M. Also Millicent Walker, she's going to provide a culinary experience, cancer fighting meals, and then we're going to be joined by Regina Hopkins. She's our health education in cancer screening and the importance of early detection. So we at Advocates, we are a faith-based health promotion ministry without walls. And so a biblical reference I want to share with you comes from Genesis 1:29 NIV. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. Okay, so when God said a plant that is bearing seeds, okay, and then there's a plant that's man-made, the food tech manufacturing, okay? He was talking about the bearing seed plant that grows from the earth, that requires sunlight, that requires watering, okay? I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my background. I am the Director of Advocates for Community Wellness. I am also a professional nutrition specialist. I'm a certified plant-based nutrition movement cooking coach. I also have a certificate that I completed in plant-based nutrition with T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. I have over 18 years of experience working in the health promotion and disease prevention sector. And I am also the former Illinois State Cooking Matter Program coordinator. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about foods that fight for you. And we're all familiar with this saying, let your food be their medicine. So what we're gonna learn today is what are cancer-fighting foods, healing factors of flavorful cruciferous vegetables, and food that helps to prevent and treat. Food has been trotted for ages for its healing benefits. And for centuries, food was very healthy, mostly because people ate food from their fields. This was the original fast food. Today, we have some food options, many of which are totally manufactured from chemicals, that the quality of much of our food has deteriorated, and so have our health. our health follows right behind it. The positive news is that cruciferous vegetables intake has repeatedly been shown to be beneficial in research studies. Overall, 67% of 87 case control studies on this topic found some kind of benefit between cruciferous veggies intake and cancer risk. So if you're going through cancer and what treats also prevents, what treats it also prevent, and what prevents can treat. So the intake of these cruciferous vegetables offer health benefits that may include reducing the risk factor of various types of cancer in humans. It contains a sulfur-containing compound that are anti-cancer fighting phytonutrients and chemicals. When we consume these vegetables by chopping them and chewing them, their compounds are released that they may potentially prevent cancer. And the cancer preventing compounds are or can enhance the elimination of carcinogen. Carcinogens are something that can cause you to have cancer before they have a chance to damage the DNA and halt the process of normal cells becoming transformed into cancer cells. And some of these compounds, we know them as antioxidants, folate, and vitamin K. And I have on my slides, I'll have the source where I'm getting the information from. So what are cruciferous vegetables? And as you can see, there's many kinds of vegetables. In a nutshell, they come from the cabbage family. And when I look at these, okay, the broccoli, the kale, arugula, cabbage, radish, horseradish, all these several different forms of vegetables, I ask myself, how often do I eat those during the course of the week? So there are healing factors of these vegetables. Cancer prevention of natural products have received considerable attention. The potential protective role of cruciferous vegetables have been extensively studied. Results have consistently shown that the chemopreventative agent, those are compounds, refer to the use of drugs or vitamins or other agents to try to reduce the risk or delay the development or reoccurrence of cancer. As a survivor of it and overcomer, I'm very concerned about reoccurrence. So whatever I did to facilitate the cancer growth in my body, I want to make sure that I'm preventing it, delaying it, slowing it down, and crushing it out. So these things these compounds are derived from one particular class of vegetables. These compounds influence carcinogenesis, the initiation of cancer formation, and it starts with one single cell. It starts with one single cell. During the initiation when one normal cell becomes abnormal, and then the promotion is the growth of it. You have one cell divided into two, two divided into four, four into eight, and so on and so on and so on, okay? So these growth phases of cancer development. Flavorful and delicious cruciferous vegetables. What are the recommendations? The USDA says just normal eating. We should eat at least 3 times a week these types of vegetables. And so that's 3 servings. A serving could be a half a cup that is cooked and a cup that is uncooked. So these help to lower aging and lower risk of disease. If you're in a health conflict, we want to magnify that, right? So we want to eat about 5 to 9 times a week. And generally as a goal, I was trying to eat and consume on most days at least 3 servings every day when I was actually going through my chemo and going through the radiation. So you can choose fresh, frozen, and canned produce. We just need to get them in our body. But our goal is to consume a natural piece of the planet. That's the goal. It's the natural every day. To be intentional about our whole foods, plant-based, vegetation, minimal processed foods whenever possible. The best cooking methods is to retain the nutrients are steaming, stir frying, sauteing, and roasting. So we want to eat different parts of the plant. We want to eat the seeds, we want to eat the roots, we want to eat the stems, we want to eat the leaves, we want to eat the flowers of the plants. And to summarize everything, there are some more health benefits in eating cruciferous vegetables. They can help, we know it can help to reduce the risk of cancers, such as breast cancers and others. It can ward off heart disease due to the fiber content, and it can prevent constipation and diverticulosis, and it can battle stress and fatigue, and it could definitely boost your immunity. Okay, and so next up, we're going to have Millicent, Chef M. She's going to share a little bit about herself.
Hello, everybody. I am Chef M, also Millicent Walker. I am the owner of Cooking Canvas. We are a recreational cooking school. And tonight, I want to show you just a couple of little recipes, but a little bit more about me. I am also the executive administrator for Stonebridge Healthy Community Outreach Initiative. And Stonebridge, we work to teach people that you can mitigate disease and chronic illnesses through your diet, that you can eat your way, like Dale was saying, you can eat your way into a healthier lifestyle. So we did this partnership with Dale because both of our organizations are aligned in that regard. And then for myself, I studied culinary school at Le Cordon Bleu, and culinary has always been a passion of mine. And it's more so just to teach people that even regardless of how you were raised, whatever kind of food you are used to eating, there are ways that you can modify your diet and still have a lot of those similar foods with just a little bit of modification so that it's not as unnutritious, I'll say, for you. So with that, I was kind of also stalling. So I have two dishes that I'm going to make for you guys tonight. I'm going to be doing a broccoli kale soup, which is why I have this nice vegetable broth, and I put a little bit of oil, olive oil in here as well, just to help keep everything, nice and lively. And then I also have a rutabaga coleslaw that I'm going to make for you guys to show you a couple of recipes that you can use to eat some of those great vegetables that Dale was just talking about. So in this broccoli kale soup, the first thing I'm going to add, I have the florets of 1 head of broccoli. And I'm going to add that in. And I want this to come back to a boil a little bit. I want these broccoli florets to be nice and bright, so that not only they're releasing their vitamins and things into the broth, but they're also cooking up a little bit to make them a little fresher. And then we also have some kale. And this was just like a couple handfuls of chopped up kale. And I did chop down to the stem. I didn't de-stem them like a lot of times we'll do when we have greens or kale or things like that. I just chopped them straight. And then I also have some celery. And this celery is going to help to bring out some extra flavor. So a lot of times when we want to cook and we don't necessarily want to add salt or different seasonings, you can use different vegetables. Celery is definitely one of those vegetables that you use. It's definitely like a staple vegetable to kind of liven up some things. Celery, carrots, and also onion. Onion is always a good one. So I just want these broccoli to cook down just a little bit. And now, in real life, I want them to be on like a medium heat for about 10 minutes. But who wants to watch boiling water for 10 minutes, right? So once we have it back to a nice strong boil, and some of this broccoli is starting to brighten up a little bit, we're going to add our celery. This was four chopped stalks of celery. And then I'll add my kale. And now this soup is really going to end up more of a puree. So we'll cook our vegetables in here to get their flavor all blended together and make them a little softer so that they actually do turn into more of a soup. If there's no cream in this soup, there's it's just the broth and the vegetables. Well, there's a little tahini, and tahini is sesame seed. It's a sesame seed paste. It's sesame seed and like a neutral oil of grapeseed or olive or something like that. And the recipe says that you can add salt, but some of us are salt apprehensive. Another thing that you can add in lieu of salt is some garlic powder, like granulated garlic or even garlic itself. So tonight I'm going to use a little garlic instead of the salt. But you can definitely use sea salt if that's your preference.
So, Chef, if we wanted to add a little, so we can get that consistency of like a cream, could we add a plant-based milk? Like
you can, but what happens with this soup is that to get that consistency, we're going to put it in the blender. We're going to let it cool a little bit and put it in the blender.
Oh, okay.
So then you do have that nice creamy consistency of a soup. Okay, you guys see, I just want my vegetables to cook down. So when you go in real life to add your celery and your kale, you want to let it cook for about 4 minutes over a medium heat. So my heat is definitely high because, again, who wants to watch water boil for 4 minutes?
So if you have any questions, feel free to ask the chef.
Yeah, definitely.
Questions during her cooking demo. You know, like if you could substitute other vegetables, or does it, you know, does she highly recommend these vegetables?
Are you actually using the sesame seeds, or did you use tahini?
Yeah, I'm using the tahini
sauce.
Yes.
Okay, like a paste, like
yes.
Okay. How many tablespoons or teaspoons or?
2/3 cup.
2/3 cup. Okay.
Yeah. And of course you can adjust. So I always say that recipes are more of a guidance as opposed to hard and fast, unless it's bacon. Now bacon is hard and fast, but recipes for everything else are kind of guidelines. So yes, you can definitely add other vegetables. All right, this is where I want it. So before I add my seasoning, like I said, I'm gonna just add a little garlic. And Dale, correct me if I'm wrong, garlic has some good properties for your heart, right?
Oh yes, for your heart and for cancer as well. Oh. They're a part of a family group, and garlic, onions, scallops, green onions, shallots, they're all very good for cancer fighting properties. Mm-hmm. What they call, now I'm learning, is called protective properties. Okay, it's protecting your cells.
That's definitely a good way to put it. So I took it off the heat. Spinach wilts very quickly, so I don't want it to overcook, but I do want it to wilt. So I turn the heat off, and now I already added the garlic, the granulated garlic. And now I added the spinach, and now I'm just adding this tahini paste, and I'm gonna stir that in. And then you can always taste your food as you go. Now, keep in mind this, when you're making soup or any hot dish, I mean, I think you got, a lot of times I teach kids, so if I say something, it's like, come on, chef, we know that. Just blame it on, I teach kids. You wanna make sure that you don't scald your mouth. So make sure that you just take a little bit and you blow it very liberally. Tasting spoon. And a lot of times with soups, you just want it to kind of be, I don't know if you guys can see that, where it's coating my spoon, but not like stuck on my spoon like a cake batter. I want it more like a icing or a melted ice cream. You know how ice cream's melted, you stick your spoon in and most of it comes off. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more garlic, and I actually am gonna heat just a pinch of salt. And then I'm gonna let this rest for a minute, because the reason you want to let it cool before you put it in your blender is because when you put really hot things in your blender, all of that heat builds up inside the blender and it can make it explode. We don't want any exploding blenders. All right.
I had one of those experiences before. It's like,
Yeah, I've had that happen before. I speak from experience.
Okay.
Patience has never been my strong suit. Okay, next we're going to do our coleslaw. And the coleslaw is really simple. We have some grated rutabaga. With this is, like I said, it's really simple. And you can definitely use turnips if you prefer. But we have some grated rutabaga. That's a cup. Some grated carrots, because what's a coleslaw without carrots? And then I always prefer red cabbage to green. That's just my preference. You can certainly do green if you prefer. And this is about a quarter of a large head.
I'm just looking at that color combination. I love
I think
those.
that's really why I like it. I really think that's why I like it to green, because it's just brighter. It's more colorful. And then just for a little bit of sweetness, I'm going to add a cup of cranberries. Okay. Now, before I add any dressing, I want to toss all of this together. And I really like doing things by hand sometimes.
I always say that you need to have a relationship with your food.
You do.
Yeah.
Something
personal.
I definitely agree with that. You have to have a relationship with your food. And it needs to be a good one.
Those are dried cranberries?
Yes, those were dried cranberries. So if you don't like the ones that are overly sweet, you can definitely get, the reduced sweet ones, or you can do blueberries. You can also do nuts if nuts are your preference.
Okay.
We tend to have a nut-free house because I have a child with really serious allergies. So unless I really have to use nuts, I usually don't.
And how much of the shredded rutabaga was that?
That was a cup. It was like half of it wasn't even really a large.
Half of a large one?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was really more like a medium one.
Okay.
And now I have 2 tablespoons of Italian dressing into half a cup of apple cider vinegar. So this is, and I'm just gonna mix those two together before I pour this over my coleslaw. And now, if you are not a fan of apple cider vinegar, you can certainly use the champagne vinegar, or white vinegar, any other kind that you would like. But just to kind of give it some flavor and some sweetness along with that vinegar, I chose the apple cider. Because remember, like I said, recipes are guidelines. They kind of tell you what families you need, what families you're putting together. So like we could switch the rutabaga because it's in the same kind of family as cabbage, but we still can add the cabbage. So, it's like you can play with your food as long as you have the parameters to play within. And then this is gonna chill. Let me do this on my refrigerator for a second. Actually, I'm gonna put it in. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of on one foot because I broke my other foot. Son.
She's a trooper. She says she's still going forward with the cooking demo.
This is called commitment. No.
You never knew until you told us.
I love what I do. And this was always a passion career for me. So I love what I do. So, and I know when Dale and I first talked about doing this cooking demo, my foot was fine. And I called Dale, I was like, yeah, so just so you know, y'all broke my foot. She's like, are you still gonna do it? I'm like, yeah, girl, of course. She's like, are you sure? I was like, of course. Now I haven't been able to work, but I'm gonna do this cooking demo. So I'm just going to take some of this. Now, can you guys see how beautiful these vegetables are?
Yes.
I could eat that just like that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you definitely can.
I don't really like them overcooked, so that looks good.
Mhm.
Mm.
I'm gonna put about half of this in here right now because I don't want it to burst. So if you do have hot things that you need to put in your blender, make sure that you give it plenty of room to there we go. Make sure you give it plenty of room to breathe. If you just are like me and just like, no, I just can't wait.
And what about that little cap on the top for it to release some air? Can you do that as well?
You can give it some air, and after I started, I am gonna take it off. But you don't want to blend it without the top because
so you know,
So
that it was just a thought.
so I'm gonna liquefy it.
You'll be cleaning the seal.
I'm probably done with it. Pour some more.
So is this a soup that you guys would make for yourself? It's perfect going into the fall and winter, actually.
It is.
Would make it. It sounds good, looks good,
Mhm.
and it seems quite easy to make also.
It really was. Like it was maybe about 10 minutes of prep. And that's it. Because really, it's like you grab the things. Now, the coleslaw probably took more time because you have the grating. But if you can find those items pre-grated, then let's do it.
Mhm. And it gives you something different to do with your broccoli. You know, we have a tendency to eat our food, prepare our food the same way throughout our life. And so, you know, maybe on that third day of the broccoli is taking it and making a simple soup with it. And that's how you can use that stem too. You know, many times we cut off and throw away the stem, but I usually cut mine up real fine, or you can chop it up and you can make a soup out of that as well.
That is true. You definitely could use the stock for that part.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna put it in this nice clear bowl for you guys to see. Did anybody have any other questions or comments, thoughts?
Someone, I just saw a flash on the screen. Someone wanted to know how long it actually takes for the vegetables to cook. Before
So the recipe calls for 10 minutes on the broccoli and 4 minutes on the celery and celery and kale. And after that, you take it off the heat before you add the spinach.
Okay.
So that's about 15 minutes. Now you might want to add another 15 minutes for boiling the vegetable stock and maybe another 15 minutes on the back end for letting it cool before you can put it in the blender. Although you could eat it without putting it in the blender if you like. Now, if I was going to do that, I would make the celery, I would cut the celery smaller. I don't know if you guys can know because that's off camera. I would cut the celery into smaller parts.
Okay.
If I was going to just eat it, you know, I would chop the vegetables a little bit smaller. But you definitely can. avoid the blender if you choose. But remember, we don't want our vegetables to be mush. We just want them to be a little cooked. And I'm not a big soup person, but I really like this. Probably because I like broccoli.
And so we want to put in a plug-in for our Eat Well Cooking Club photo drawing. And so we want you to show off your cooking skills, to make one or more of the recipes that we have shared with you over the course of this year. And or you can get one of your favorite. I'll take one of your favorite, but the kicker is it has to be a plant-based recipe. And you can send it to info@a4cw.org, and it's a chance to win a prize. It'll be more than one winner too. And so we will be doing a drawing at the end of this month. So if you have taken some pictures, if you have some and you just didn't send them in, please send it in. And so now we're going to go to our mealtime discussion with Regina. She is the Director of Advocates for Community Wellness of Health Education, and she's also a family nurse practitioner.
So my name is Regina Hopkins. I am a family nurse practitioner serving on the south side of Chicago. My background, I have about 16 years of experience in the medical field. I'm currently working as a nurse practitioner. My specialty is chronic disease management, particularly cardiovascular disease and diabetes. I am also the Director of Health Education for Advocates for Community Wellness. Once again, welcome tonight to our presentation. I want to just speak very briefly about the importance of cancer screenings, just for the sake of giving out the information to hopefully to help you be aware of all the recommended cancer screenings, especially the ones that are recommended for this month and also the months to come. I'm going to touch briefly on just 5 of the different cancer screenings, particularly breast cancer, colon cancer, cervical cancer, lung cancer, and prostate cancer. Just a few facts. African Americans have the highest mortality rate of any racial and ethnic group for all cancers combined, and for most of the majority of cancers. The death rates for all major causes of death are higher for African Americans than whites, contributing in part to a lower life expectancy for both African American men and African American women. Starting off with breast cancer, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, October, hence the pink ribbon. I also want to just briefly discuss for each of the different cancers, risk factors that are associated with that particular cancer, as well as the recommended screenings. So for breast cancer, if you may or may not know, some of the risk factors include obesity, alcohol consumption, if you've never been pregnant, if never breastfed, birth control pills, hormonal therapy after menopause, and family history. I like to emphasize 2 important ones, birth control pills and also hormonal therapy after menopause. What a lot of women may not know is that the exposure of extra estrogen in the form of the birth control pill or estrogen therapy that's used to treat some symptoms during and after menopause is considered a risk factor for breast cancer. One of the biggest things I like to educate my patients on, especially women who come seeking contraception management, is that to be mindful that birth control pills themselves, because there is estrogen as well as progesterone in it, the component of estrogen can raise your chances of getting breast cancer. In addition to that, family history also plays a risk factor in developing breast cancer. So in terms of the screenings for breast cancer, actually screening, a form of a screening can start as early as the age of 21. From the age of 21 to 40, we encourage women to do self-breast exams, get to know your breasts, feeling for any lumps or bumps or anything abnormal. That's the first indication for screening, to be screened for breast cancer if you haven't met the age to have the actual mammogram. So doing self-breast exams at home, I'm not sure what age ranges we have on the Zoom call today, but every woman, between those ages of 21 to 40, and even also older than that, you should get a feel for how your breasts feel on a routine basis. So that means when you're in the shower, taking the tips of your fingers, rubbing your breasts from top to bottom, all around under your armpits, feeling for any abnormal lumps or bumps. If you do feel something that feels abnormal, that's definitely, concerning to you, it's recommended that you see your PCP to speak about potential screenings. But for women who are 40 and over, 40 to 75 years old, the recommended screening for mammogram is the age of 40. So women on the Zoom call today, if you are between the age range of 40 to 75 and you have not received your annual mammogram, I encourage you to do that. One thing I like to emphasize is that early detection and early screening can save lives. I always, when I speak about, breast cancer screenings, and just cancer screenings in general, I tell individuals that I've encountered a lot of patients with different types of cancers. And I have tons of stories that I always share as educational tools. But the main take home from that story is that a lot of times the early screening was missed. Most people have a fear of getting the cancer screenings because of the unknown. But I always try to emphasize to each and every individual that I meet, if you meet the criteria for a cancer screening, please take advantage of those recommended screenings. In addition to that, for women who have a strong family history of multiple women in your family who have breast cancer, meaning you have a mother who had breast cancer, an auntie who had breast cancer, a sister who had breast cancer, you may definitely be at risk of breast cancer yourself. So there's also a screening tool for the BRCA1 and 2 genetic screening. That's something you can speak to your provider about as well if you have a strong family history of breast cancer and you're not at the age of 40 yet to receive a mammogram. Speak to your healthcare provider about getting genetic testing. And also for individuals who aren't at the recommended age of having a mammogram, also know too that you can qualify for a screening breast ultrasound. Most women tend to feel that, well, I'm not 40 yet, so therefore I can't have a mammogram. That's not true. There's also screening breast ultrasounds that can also pick up, different abnormalities in the breast as well. So if you feel something, the takeaway is that you speak to your healthcare provider about having some type of screening completed to get screened for breast cancer. The next cancer I want to discuss is colon cancer. Some of the risk factors for colon cancer, of course, is age, obesity, strong family history, smoking, race. African Americans tend to have a higher risk of colon cancer, and also diet. And we've heard a lot about foods to eat to decrease your chances of cancer, but also you want to be mindful of foods to avoid to decrease your chances of cancer, and particularly the processed meats. They have a chemical called nitrites that has been linked to colon cancer. So that includes your breakfast sausages, your deli meats, your hot dogs, all those processed foods and meats, especially also the smoked meats too, have those nitrites in it that has been linked to colon cancer. So for the screening for colon cancer, actually starts at the age of 45 years old now. A few years ago, the minimum screening age for colon cancer was 50. However, due to the increased number of patients getting cancer at a younger age, younger than 50, the American Cancer Society has decreased the age now to 45. So if you are 45 years old and then you have yet to get your colon cancer screening, I strongly encourage you to do that. Once again, colon cancer screening, as other recommended cancer screenings, early detection can save lives. So there's two options for screening for colon cancer. The first option is a simple stool test called the fecal occult blood test. Pretty much just a little package you can take home, collect a stool sample, send it to the lab. It can detect if you have blood in your stool. That's one way. However, the gold standard that I always push for patients to receive is the actual colonoscopy. A lot of patients cringe when I speak to them about getting a colonoscopy because no one wants a camera stuck up their rectum. However, the important thing to know is that the colonoscopy itself, it can detect and can find those polyps that can lead to cancer in the future. And if you complete the colonoscopy, those potential cancerous polyps or growths can be removed. Now, the stool kit does not detect a growth or a polyp, it only detects blood. So if you have the option to have a potential cancer growing tumor caught early in your colon removed, I encourage you definitely to do that. That will be completed during the actual procedure, which is the colonoscopy. So once again, between the ages of 45 to 75, those are the recommended age ranges for colon cancer screening in the form of a colonoscopy or a stool sample. The next screening I want to discuss is cervical cancer screening as well as endometrial screening. I'm going to speak very briefly on endometrial screening, but first I want to talk about the cervical cancer screening. All women at the age of 21 and above, up to 65, should have a pap smear completed. Some of the risk factors for cervical cancer, the most important risk factor for cervical cancer is HPV exposure. Many people don't even know what HPV is. When I've done educational talks about cervical cancer screening, a lot of people are clueless on what HPV is. HPV actually stands for human papillomavirus. It is an STD, a virus that you contract during sexual activity. And HPV itself can stay in the body and can change the cervical cells and make them become cancerous. So the recommended screening to screen for cervical cancer as well as HPV exposure is 21 in the form of a pap smear. Now the guidelines have changed. Initially they were performing pap smears every year, but most guidelines now recommend if you have a normal pap smear completed that women can actually wait 3 years now to get the next pap smear. But if you are between the ages of 21 to 65, sexually active, if you have not had an up-to-date cervical cancer screening in the form of a pap smear, I recommend that you do that as well. Some of the additional risk factors for cervical cancer is smoking, being sexually active at an early age, and also a weak immune system. One of the cancers that we don't hear a lot about because there really isn't a recommended screening for, but it is something that I'd like to educate patients on, is endometrial cancer. Pretty much that is just a cancer inside the uterine, the wall of the uterus, the lining inside of the uterus. Some of the risk factors for endometrial cancer is obesity, being postmenopausal. Once again, we talked early on about having that estrogen therapy. Most women may have received that to help with some of the symptoms of menopause. But once again, the estrogen itself can thicken the lining of the uterine wall that can lead to endometrial cancer in the future. But one of the main symptoms or the telltale sign that I have seen in my experience for women who have developed endometrial cancer is bleeding after menopause. So if you have reached menopause, meaning you have not had a period for 12 consecutive months, no bleeding at all, if for some reason you have blood, it can be small as a drop of blood that you see when you take a trip to the bathroom, that is a concern. Because what has happened is the lining of the endometrium or the lining of the uterine wall has gotten thick and it has begun to shed off, which is a telltale sign for endometrial cancer. So I don't care if it's a speck of blood, a drop of blood that you may have, that you see. If you have, the key thing to remember is if you are in menopause, meaning you have not had a period for 12 months, and now all of a sudden you see, some bleeding or some spotting, that is a warning sign, that is a concern. You need to definitely speak to your doctor about being screened for endometrial cancer. And the screening tool for that is a simple pelvic ultrasound or an endometrial biopsy. Next is prostate cancer. I'm not sure how many males we have on the call, but even if there aren't any males on the call, I'm quite sure, I know we all know a male, a male in our lives that we can share and encourage to get their screening also for prostate cancer. So risk factors for prostate cancer is age, race. Of course, African Americans, we tend to have the the highest risk for different types of cancer, and family history. So the recommended age group for screening for prostate cancer is 40 and above, especially for African Americans, because we do have a higher risk for males getting prostate cancer. 40 is actually the starting age for African American men for screening for prostate cancer. And it's two simple tests. You can do either a digital rectal exam that's done by a specialist, a urologist, or the healthcare provider. But most importantly, it's a blood test. So once again, a lot of men, when I encourage them to, get screened for prostate cancer, there's the cringe because no one wants, something stuck in the backside. But the relieving factor is letting them know that it's a blood test that can be completed. And that can be completed with your annual blood work to be screened for prostate cancer. So if you know a male 40 and above, speak to them, tell them you had a Zoom call tonight. You want to pass along an encouragement to get screened for prostate cancer if they reach that, if they are in that age bracket. And lastly, lung cancer. There is a screening, believe it or not, for lung cancer, recommended screening for lung cancer. We don't hear about it that often, but there is a screening for lung cancer. Some of the risk factors associated with lung cancer, of course, is cigarette smoking, secondhand smoke, family history, HIV infection, and environmental risk factors such as your asbestos, polluted air, and radon. So the screening age range for lung cancer is between the ages of 55 to 75 with a history of smoking. And it is a simple CT scan. It's called a low-dose CT scan, where they use supposedly a very low dose of radiation in the CT to screen for lung cancer. So if you know someone between the ages of 55 to 75 have a history of smoking, definitely encourage them. There's a screening for lung cancer. If they fit the criteria, they can speak to their healthcare provider about getting that screening, which is called a low-dose CT scan. And if you are under the age of 55, because most of the time the insurances, won't approve it if you don't fit the criteria for the low-dose CT scan. But just know if you have symptoms, a cough that doesn't go away, if you have a history of smoking or exposure to secondhand smoke, weight loss, breathing problems, a chest x-ray also will be sufficient as well for the lung cancer screening. And that is all that I have for recommended screenings for lung cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colon cancer. I hope this was helpful to you.
I have a question, and thank you, Regina. That was a great presentation. When women go through menopause, and I know in some of your risk factors you described postmenopausal, is it just a certain duration after you you go through menopause, or is it a risk factor like for an indefinite period of time?
No, so the risk factor is the women who have received the hormonal therapy, during menopause. It's the estrogen itself in the hormonal therapy that can increase your chances of breast cancer.
Okay, so just by being in menopause, that doesn't?
No, being in menopause itself, it doesn't increase your chances. It's the therapy that most women receive during menopause. But I emphasize being postmenopausal, in terms of being mindful of the endometrial cancer, because a lot of women tend to, in my experience, when I've had women who were diagnosed with endometrial cancer, when I speak to them about, symptoms of, irregular spotting or bleeding, they always say, oh yeah, I got my period again, a couple of months ago. And I'm telling them, well, there's no such thing as getting your period again once you've reached menopause. Once it's stopped, it's stopped. So it's just an educational piece to let them know that it's not normal for you to have bleeding after menopause. So don't, think that, oh, you've gotten another period and it's been 5 years. Any bleeding after you've had your period has stopped for those 12 consecutive months, meaning you are in menopause, that's a warning sign for potential endometrial cancer.
Okay.
That's very good information for us to really get out in the community, because I could easily see where that would be misunderstood, unfortunately.
I have a question in reference to the mammogram and the age that was recommended. 40 to 75. What I do know, and research supports that, is that people are living longer. And the longer you live, like in your 80s, the higher your risk factors for cancer increase. And I know for my mom, for her second reoccurrence, it was a new site on her left breast and then a reoccurrence on her right breast. And she was like 82. So even if you reach that 75, I would still recommend doing those breast exams and just reporting anything that's out of the ordinary. And I'm just going to share one cancer fact on cancer as a global killer. It states that 1 in 3 people will develop cancer during their lifetime. This is globally. 1 in 9 have a risk factor of developing again if they survive the first. And then 2 in 9 people have an increased risk of developing a second primary cancer, meaning that it'll appear in another location in your body. So we do want to be mindful. We want to be intentional. One thing that we can do is let our food be our medicine, making sure that we are including, number one, cruciferous vegetables in our diet, and at a minimum 3 times a week. And so we're going to close out. If you guys could give me just a couple more minutes. I'm sorry. I want to invite you to continue. This is a 3-part series. We're going to have Chef M next week to share some more meals that heals. And we'll do some food that will fight for you. And we also will have on our 3rd session, Nancy Rodriguez, who is a Food for Life instructor. She's also going to have a very special presentation. And this is how you can get in contact with Advocates for Community Wellness. You can take a screenshot of this if you're new to us, and then Stonebridge Healthy Community Initiative. We want to thank Chef M for providing the funds for the cooking demo for this session. In fact, for our October session, her company, Cooking Canvas, is picking up the tab for the cooking. And this is her contact information. We want to stay connected with you. We invite you to follow us on our Facebook. We have a new Facebook page. Please visit us at Advocates for Community Wellness. And then we also have started our Instagram, and where you can post pictures anything, any food that you make or prepare, because we are building and creating a community around healthy lifestyle with food as at the core of what we do to help us to stay healthy. And I want to thank you for joining us today. I know, Regina, if you can stick around for a minute or two, if others have questions that they may want to ask that they didn't get a chance to ask, or you want to ask me of any questions about foods that fight for you, the bottom line is those cruciferous vegetables. Make them a part of your weekly diet. So my time is up, and I thank you for yours.